So, hi everyone. As I said, my name is Amandine Flachs, and for the past 5 years or so, we have been hearing more and more about machine learning and how it's completely transforming some industries. And I know sometimes some news make AI look like it's all done by magic and sounds too good to be true. And let's be honest, sometimes it is. There are so many ways to use machine learning techniques and apply them to a number of problems. As for all emerging technologies, the key then is to find the right applications and how it's going to fit into the ecosystem in place. And that obviously applies to video games too. So today I am going to mention a bunch of real life applications of machine learning for game development, starting with one that is very close to my heart, using machine learning to create smarter bots and non-playable entities. So let's first take a look at the problem. When you ask players about good game AIs, they only mention games that are from 10 years ago. And that's because games have become more and more complex over the years. But the game AI haven't evolved much and are still following a script. Let's take pathfinding, for example. You do have well-known algorithms and techniques for pathfinding that will enable a character to navigate on a map. And it works fine on its own for a number of games, but with the increasing complexity of modern games, you still end up today with the NPCs that continue to struggle to go from point A to point B. And that's something machine learning can definitely help with. There's also a huge interest in multiplayer and competitive games. Take PUBG. It is said that there's between 20 and 95% of bots per game. I mean, that's huge. And that wouldn't be a problem if these bots weren't dumb and only used for target practice. As I said, game AI are following a script, which means it does require a huge amount of work to make them believable characters. What if you could use machine learning instead to teach a bot to play like a human? What if you couldn't tell if that's a human or a bot playing with you? So here is a short clip from Dota 2. You can see the character we are following here. So that's a character with a circle underneath. It uses creeps, denies last hits, and makes the most of its tower defense. Well, sorry for the notification sound. That's fairly common techniques used by human players. But here, that's not a human playing. It's one of the bots my company WildMeta created. And we didn't ask it to do these actions in sequence. We just helped it learn to play the game so it can choose its move on its own during a game. I created WildMeta in 2019 to help game developers create smarter and more human-like game AI using machine learning. And if I was to give the advantages of using machine learning for game AIs in a nutshell, I'd say the first thing, as I mentioned earlier, with machine learning, we can create AIs that learn to play your game, so they will react to the environment and choose their next actions accordingly to the other player's moves. Also, machine learning based bots can learn human tactics directly from existing gameplay. So let's say you have launched an open beta or an early access of your game, and you notice players have developed some interesting tactics. You can use their gameplay to show the AI and teach it these new potential tactics. With machine learning, you can also create game AIs that are more flexible and robust to changes. So there's more and more games using procedural generation, which adds quite a level of complexity for bots. If you take that into consideration during the training of the AI, it will learn to adapt to it. And, the list goes on depending on the type of game and the need of these specific games. once an AI knows how to play your game, it can also be used in so many ways. So it could be used as an NPC or also pass for another player. You can use the AI as the opponent AI, right? So you have always available opponents on your platform, on your game. Also, you can use game AI as training bots. So especially for competitive games, uh, it was actually the focus we had when we started WildMeta. So that would also help players avoid potential toxic communities. Let's say, for example, you're a League of Legends player, and you could, for example, with game AI, smarter game AIs, you could, for example, reproduce very specific strategies from a past game, or train to play a defined role. So, for example, for those who play support roles, that's very difficult to do today. It's hard to train for that. So, training bots, as I said, that's the focus that we had when we started WildMeta. But then we realized there were so many other applications just for machine learning based bots. So another example, sometimes players get disconnected. So when you're in the middle of a multiplayer game, that can be a problem. You could replace players mid-game by a bot, and so other players wouldn't be affected at all. Also, you could use AIs to join a squad team to play in collaboration with humans, with bots that are able to follow orders, but also do things that help the player without being commanded to do so. Another use for them is also for QA and testing to help the developers during the creation of the game. So, for example, if you want to stress test your servers for the launch of your, let's say, upcoming MMO, it can be hard to get test players together. So, we can get as many bots as we want to do that. And while they are at it, we can also use them to explore the world and find and report bugs. So that's many concrete applications of machine learning for game AI. Many other applications exist, and they all have their own set of challenges and benefits. Now, I already hear you. If machine learning is so great, why isn't it already everywhere in game development? Well, when we think about machine learning in games, the first examples that usually come to mind are the work done by AI research organizations such as OpenAI and DeepMind. They use video games to demonstrate their work, and they manage to build AI as good as the best human professional players in the world, as they demonstrated with Dota 2 for OpenAI and StarCraft 2 for DeepMind. Since then, we've seen more and more AAA studios starting talking about the use of this technology. And one of the recurring theme has been using machine learning for animation. So here are some examples from Ubisoft, especially Ubisoft La Forge in Montreal and Embark Studio. And they have written some articles and shared some publication on how they are using machine learning specifically to improve the animation of the game. Another studios that does that and actually did it in production in a game was Insomniac Game and Sony, using machine learning for make the animation look more cinematic in the most recent Spider-Man games. And as I said, it's already in production, and they have been communicating about it more recently. Now, when I talked about game AIs earlier, I mentioned the importance of creating a believable character. While Meta focuses on the character's behaviors and decision, but animations are another key element of making a character believable. There has been many meme and videos from Mass Effect Andromeda when it first launched. And well, we all saw that even if a character's actions make sense, if they can't walk the stairs properly, then it won't work. And let's just see visually an example of that. but it has been improved a lot after the launch. So definitely can give the developers credit for that. A few other examples. So you have more and more studios that started also about talking about different ways they are using machine learning or researching how to make the most of the technology for game development. So for example, we have for Microsoft Flight Simulators, Asobo, the studio behind the game, they converted 2D maps into 3D, and they're using also in-game real-time weather simulation that is just amazing. A few days ago, still Microsoft, they mentioned using machine learning to create an unbeatable game AI for the upcoming Age of Empire 4. And I have to say, I can't wait to try it out, or I should say, watch other players better than I am to try it out, because that's going to be quite interesting. Forza also has been using machine learning for its driver system for car trajectory. And there's actually some very interesting deep dive on that. So if you're interested, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. Another example also, Electronic Arts, they have been sharing some articles about using machine learning to help balance the difficulty in game. So unfortunately, sorry, with the way game studios work, and especially the way they are financed, not every studio can afford to have a dedicated research team. So we've been talking to a bunch of studios, lots of different studios, different size, different location. And I put together kind of the major barriers to entry I have identified. The first one is obviously technical. So access to talent is already difficult in game, but also in different area of tech. But looking for talents with machine learning plus gaming experience is very rare. That's something very difficult to find. Plus, you need to understand your compute requirements and understand a complete different tech stack. The second area is managerial. Machine learning development doesn't really work the same way as traditional software development. There is the technical aspects, of course, but also when it comes to planning, it can be very hard to understand how this fits into your existing time frame and agenda, or even with the rest of the team. And I'd say last but not least, the monetary aspect. So the R&D cost to build the system from scratch is quite high. And studios' budgets are usually tied to one game or one project, which means that it can be very difficult to justify this initial development cost just for one game. And there's also, to add to that, the compute need and the cost for the compute. So that's actually a major point of cost that needed to be taken in consideration early on. But then that doesn't mean that this technology has to be only reserved for the biggest studios that can afford it. And I see different paths to facilitate the adoption of machine learning in game in a way that could benefit both the players and the game developers, because that's something that maybe I haven't stressed out enough until now, but it's about helping the game developers, but also finding a reason why it works in the end for the players too. And you have to find the balance for that and the best way to fit into both agendas and objective. So for that, I can see, as I said, two different ways to facilitate adoption. The first one is you can use open source project or openly available tools that offer pre-trained model for a specific need. So I'm sure many of you have already used, for example, deepfake tools or synthetic faces generator. You have several of them made available by the open source community. And they do not require to understand machine learning to get your results and to use simply. A company that actually understood that pretty well is OpenAI and its GPT-3 API, used by an increasing number of developers across the world. Last time I checked, I think they were mentioning something like 100,000 of developers using the API, but it was a while ago. So I don't know the number of people using the API today, but for sure I see more and more very interesting projects going out of theirs and just openly talking about how they're using GPT-3. And if you've played the text-based game AI Dungeon, the team actually used an anterior version of GPT-3, so it was GPT-2. But I'm sure Gemma, who is speaking right after me, will tell you more about GPT and natural languages, and I'm sure she will have much more to details to provide than I do on that front. Another way to start adopting machine learning is through specialized partner that are usually going to focus on one specific area, one purpose, one very defined use case. So for example, there is a London-based startup called Sonantic. Maybe some of you are familiar with it because I've seen it more and more in some chats and some groups. So they are creating synthetic voices using machine learning and especially focus on video game production. Another example is Ask Blue. I've heard the founder speak at an event just before summertime, and their focus is on mobile game balancing and real-time personalization. So once again, quite specific. And of course, last example, my own company, WildMeta, being a specialized outsourcing company, just focusing on machine learning, game AIs, gives us the opportunity to talk directly with game developers and really deep dive into their needs, deep dive into their questions, their challenges, how what they're doing with game AIs today, what they are exploring, and understand really the question they have when it comes to machine learning, because they do have many questions usually. And one of the main questions we hear is on how this technology fits into the existing tech stack. And I don't really think that's something that only worries game developers, but actually that will worry anyone adopting some new technologies. And that's what we've been actively listening to studios. And so what we've done is we built our own library that interacts directly with the game engine used by the developers to access what our machine learning system needs to train the AI. So this way, it's kind of a way of demystifying machine learning without adding complex new concepts or concerns to the developers by talking the same language, basically. And while I have no doubts there will be more in-house machine learning experts in video game studios in the future, I also don't see how most studios will adopt this new technology on their own today without a little help from an external provider or someone who really specializes in it. So in video games, everyone is waiting for the next major title. We see an increasing coverage on the tech behind the games, but it's still kind of seen as being less sexy for some reasons. And one of the common misconception I hear is people thinking this technology isn't going to be ready for production before years. And I can tell you, it's already ready for production today. I'm sure machine learning is going to be massively used in game development in the years to come, but we just need to hear more about it, hear more about what people are exploring, what kind of use cases people are working on, and also just having everyone talking about it more openly. And so it's not just something that will come in years, but actually people can open up on what they're really doing with that, how they can really benefit from it, and how it applies to specific type of games also. So that's it for me. I hope this was helpful. Please do feel free to ask as many questions as you want during the Q&A right after Gemma's session. Thanks.